Locating Solomon's Temple by Norma Robertson. The location of the temple platform where both Solomon and Herod's temples once stood has remained a mystery for almost 2,000 years. There are 5 theories as to where the temple was once located. The most popular is under the Dome of the Rock. The second theory shows it to be under the Dome of the Spirits, just north of the Dome of the Rock. The third theory claims it was under the fountain, halfway between the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. The fourth has the temple completely outside the Temple Mount, in the midst of what was once the city of David. The fifth is of course mine, which shows the temple to be in the most southern position on the Temple Mount, deep below and to the west of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. The first 4 theories have one problem in common: lack of physical proof. They feel that if they were able to excavate on the mount, then they would find enough ruins of gates and walls, etc., to prove the actual location. That, however, is not allowed by the Muslims. I have found that there's a lot of physical proof if you look to the south end of the mount. I will be showing that physical proof in the form of old photos of the Ophel area and the survey maps from the 1800s, drawn by the last explorers ever allowed to enter the underground chambers, cisterns, and water channels beneath the mount. When studying about the location of the Temple of God, one of the most important things to do is to begin with the location of Solomon's Temple, built around 1000 BC. Herod tore down and rebuilt the temple on the exact same location around 19 BC. His descendants then increased the temple fortress or complex that surrounded the temple house to be double the size according to Herod's plans. These walls, doubling the size of the temple, were not completed until AD 66, and the city and temple were then destroyed a few years later in AD 70. Josephus, a Jewish historian that lived during the time of the destruction of the temple and city of Jerusalem, is a great source concerning the temple. He wrote that Herod's temple complex was a furlong in length and in width. A furlong by a furlong is approximately 600 by 600 feet. This doubled the size of Solomon's temple complex. Both temple complexes shared the same east wall. Herod felt that the east gate was too beautiful to tear down, so refused to let his builders work on it. They merely extended the east wall to the north and to the south. The temple, the priest's court, and the woman's court were rebuilt by Herod the Great pre-1st century. Later, as Herod's grandson and great-grandson extended the outer courts during the 1st century, then parts of the old wall of Solomon's complex were most likely removed. Notice that the Wailing Wall is located on the upper left side of this diagram on the 1st century wall. This survey map reveals the water channels under the Temple Mount. It appears that the Muslims closed off the water channels leading to the south when they built their fountain. The aqueduct entered the mount through Wilson's Arch. It didn't go uphill from there towards the Dome of the Rock, which would have been the case if the temple had been located there, but instead the channel was laid towards the south, downhill from where it entered the mount, further indicating that the temple was located at the south end of the mount. The Dome of the Rock is approximately 20 feet higher than the aqueduct. The aqueduct was built by Solomon, bringing water to the temple from the Etam Springs, Ain Etan, near Solomon's pools. The Jerusalem Talmud, Yama 3:41, says that a conduit ran from the Eton to the temple. From this we can understand that the temple court was cleansed with water being brought to the temple from the spring of Etam near Bethlehem. It flowed to the temple by the use of a conduit or aqueduct. The water for cleansing the court did not come out of the Gihon springs. During the Second Temple period, a new way of filling the laver was devised called the machni. Ben Caton, one of the high priests who served during the era of the Second Temple, devised a system for retrieving the water each morning using this machinery. The laver was submerged into a specially made pool under the court. The laver was then hoisted up by the first priest in the morning. When I laid my temple diagram over the map of the water channels, the large pool was right next to the temple house. This was very exciting. Another branch of this water system ended under what I believe to be the location of the priest's court. For me, this was the last piece of the puzzle. This section of water channel could be opened to flood the priest's court each evening to cleanse it of the blood. The Mishnah tells us that the water for filling the copper laver every day was brought by a conduit from the pools of Bethlehem. The water system also branched off towards the place where the chamber of the hearth would have been located, for filling the mikveh below it. There was a drain next to the altar where the water and blood would have drained into the blood channel leading to the Kidron Valley. Nehemiah's wall gives us some important information that helps us identify where the temple was not located. According to Scripture, Nehemiah did not rebuild any of the temple walls. He only rebuilt the city walls, which means that the east wall of the mount that we see today was part of the city wall that Nehemiah rebuilt, and not the east wall of Solomon's temple. The east gate on that city wall was not the east gate of the temple complex. Nehemiah called this gate the commander's or inspector's gate. There is no way this is the east gate of Solomon's temple, nor that of Herod's. The true east gate, Solomon's east gate, was in the center of the east wall and entered directly into the woman's court. The ruins of the oldest gate in the eastern wall still remain under the Muslim gate that we see today. Leon Rittmeyer, after finding 2 stones of what he believes to be part of the old Hezekiah wall, 700 BC, indicates that the Hasmonean wall joins to the Hezekiah wall. This means there would also be a joint where these 2 walls meet together. The Hezekiah wall that Nehemiah would have rebuilt extended from the supposed joint and ends just beyond the commander's gate. Even though I agree with Dr. Rittmeyer about Hezekiah's wall beginning with these 2 stones, I disagree that it was a wall of the temple. Remember, Nehemiah rebuilt the city wall only. He did not rebuild any of the outer walls of the temple. Leon Rittmeyer claims this old Hezekiah city wall was the east wall of the temple compound, and so places the location of the temple where the Dome of the Rock is now. It's very interesting to trace the changes in the area from the time that Nehemiah rebuilt the city wall all the way up to when Josephus describes Fort Antonia. The wall described by Nehemiah had 2 towers on its north wall, the Tower Mea and the Tower Hananel. These towers protected the temple from a northern attack. The Mea fortress was built upon under the Hasmoneans during the late 2nd century BC and was renamed the Barras. It was rectangular and possessed several high towers. The Barras was connected to the Temple Mount by an underground passageway. The barrass was then besieged by Pompey the Great during his siege of Jerusalem in 63 BC, during which one of the towers was destroyed. Under Herod the Great, the barrass underwent extensive reconstruction. He named it Fort Antonia in honor of Mark Antony. Fort Antonia, just as the barrass and the mea before it, was located on the old north wall that Nehemiah rebuilt. There was a natural land bridge between Fort Antonia and the hill to its north. The moat was 200 feet long, and to the east of it was a ravine running down into the Kidron Valley. The moat was cut for the purpose of separating the two hills, and also making it impossible for catapults to be set up near the north wall of the fortress, for lack of flat land. However, attacking armies would just fill in the moat and create a flat surface and break down the north wall, taking the fortress. From there they could take the temple. It is my belief that the walls of Fort Antonia were at a northwest angle to the temple. The reason is because of a step at the northwest corner of the Dome of the Rock platform. The bottom step is not a step at all. It is in fact the top of a very old wall. That step, or wall, is set at an angle. The red dashed line in the map shows the old west wall following that same angle as it bends southward, forming the northwest corner of Fort Antonia. Recently, coins from the 1st century were found under the west wall of the Temple Mount that we see today. This means that Herod the Great did not build the southern portion of the west wall, including the bridge called Robertson's Arch. However, this bridge was one of the west gates Josephus claimed entered directly into the 600 by 600 foot temple complex. We also know that the walls of the temple were not completed until 66 AD, and yet Josephus attributes it all to Herod as the builder, who died in 4 BC. So this work was most likely completed under Herod Agrippa I and Herod Agrippa II of the house of Herod. Josephus describes the temple and Fort Antonia after the walls of the extended temple area were completed. The temple courts were extended to the north, west, and south. Fort Antonia complex was connected to the temple complex by 2 colonnades. According to Josephus, the temple compound and Fort Antonia compound together were 6 furlong around. That makes the temple complex 600 by 600 feet, and also the Fort Antonia complex as 600 by 600 feet. In this map of the 1st century Jerusalem, the red square is the location and size of the Temple Mount today. The yellow area would have been the city walls in the time of Nehemiah. Herod rebuilt this wall and also built a wall around the north quarter of the city in green. A third city wall included the city of Bethesda in purple. This third wall connected to the old Hezekiah city wall on the east. There wasn't a wall between Bethesda Hill and the moat. The gates of the temple were very large buildings. There were 2 gates in Herod's northern wall, the north gate and the toddy gate. The gate's special lintel, built from 2 stones, one leading on the other, together formed a triangle of the toddy gate. Warren's description of Cistern 6 is that its shape inside was like a hollow truncated pyramid, very similar. These 2 underground cisterns, buildings number 36 and 6, seem to be the ruins of Herod's north gate and toddy gate. In the western wall there were 4 gates. One is called Robertson's Arch on the map. It entered the mount by means of a huge staircase. 600 feet across from this gate is the underground halls called Triple Gate on Warren's map. Inside Triple Gate, on the western side, partway up the passageway, was what appeared to be a huge lintel of a gate. This gate would have been the true east gate to the temple. This gate can also be seen on Sir Charles Wilson's map. Notice that the Muslims name this gate on the east the Gate of Elias, but that lintel and the ruins below would have been the gate which entered directly into the women's court of the temple. What this means is that these vaulted halls of Triple Gate on the maps were actually Solomon's porch or portico that he built to the east of the temple house. There are 3 archways of what are called Triple Gate in the south wall of the Temple Mount. The 2 on the right would have been how people entered and exited the porch from the south, and from there entered the east gate into the women's court. The arch on the left, the west, would have actually been inside the temple. When Benjamin Mazar excavated the Ophel mound starting in 1967, ruins of stairs were found leading down from the 2 arches on the right only. There was a gap in the walkway between the arch on the left and the 2 arches on the right. In my theory, this is because that gap was where Solomon's east wall once stood. This would make the inside hall on the left, the west, Solomon's stoa, which lined the eastern wall inside the temple complex, and the other 2 halls on the right, east, an arched, open-aired entryway, so to speak, to the east gate. The king's entrance, because Solomon had built his palace just south of this on the Ophel mound, and he entered through the east gate into the temple complex. The east wall that ran through this building would have consisted of a series of arches on both sides of the east gate running north and south. Inside, these halls are full of tons and tons of dirt and debris, leaving only the tops of the arches exposed. These halls do not lead up to the mount surface and never did. To think that Solomon's porch might still exist to this day, buried beneath the surface of the Temple Mount, is amazing to say the least. There is another set of arches in the southern wall that Warren called Double Gate. The Jews call these arches the Hulda Gate, believing this gate to be the most southern gate of Herod's temple complex. Only a small portion of one of these arches can be seen today. They were covered up when the Crusaders built a building against the south wall. In my theory, this is not the most southern gate of Herod's temple. Instead, this gate would have been what is called an inner gate of the temple. The inner gates were the entrances to the men's court, priest court, and the temple house itself. This is how the double gate halls appear on Warren's map. Next is the same map with an overlay of my diagram. I believe these halls to be where the old inner gates were once located. The inner south and north gates with the men's court in between. A single passage then continues to where Solomon's old north gate would have been located. To me, the ruins are speaking quite clearly of what they once were. The archways lay deep below the Al-Aqsa Mosque. I don't believe these halls to have been built by Herod. They are of recycled stones and columns. In fact, they were built after the 70 AD destruction of the temple. Even though these great halls were built after 70 AD, they were built upon those things that remained from the first and second temple era, such as the floor and steps. Sir Charles Warren wrote that the passages only extended for 190 feet from the south wall. But when the mosque was built, it appears that the passage was extended to its present length of 260 feet, but only on the east side. This means that the halls did not lead up to the temple platform when they were first built. To me it looks as though someone dug out the inner gates and the men's court to preserve the area, perhaps to create a place of Jewish prayer. It definitely was built when no buildings were on the mount above it. So sometime after the Temple of Jupiter was torn down in 325 AD. The plaque from a statue at that time, which stood before the Temple of Jupiter, can be seen upside down in the wall above the Arch of Double Gate. Perhaps the builders of these walls could have been the Jews that were allowed to return to rebuild their temple in 360-63 AD. The work stopped when an earthquake hit and fire issued out of the ground. Many people were killed and maimed. The Muslims claimed that these walls were part of the first wooden mosque built on the mount that collapsed during an earthquake, but these halls are made of stone, not of wood, as the old mosque was. This sketch was drawn of the double gate halls as it might have looked when first built. Moving on now to the southeast corner, known as the section containing Solomon's Stables. What an imposing sight this southeast corner is. Trying to visualize the mount without this corner at the time of Herod is difficult, but that was the case, as I hope to prove to you. The upper portion of the wall, all the way round the mount, was built by the Muslims after 638 AD. Below that is the portion that was constructed by the Romans. In the lowest portion of the wall, on the eastern side, there is a straight joint in the wall where the Hasmonean wall meets up with what is believed to be a Hadrian wall built in the 1st century. The Hasmonean wall ending at this vertical line in the east wall tells us that their wall took a 90-degree turn westward at this point. So the question is, did Herod's descendants build the wall from the Hasmonean wall all the way around to Triple Gate on the south wall, or was it built at a later time? Inside the lower section of this wall, it is made up of terraced vaults. The vaults are mistakenly called Solomon's Stables, dubbed so by the Crusaders, who used the upper vaults to stable their horses. In November 1868, Captain Charles Warren of the British Royal Engineers dug a vertical shaft around 90 feet down to the bedrock at the southeast angle of the Temple Mount platform. This sketch shows what they found. Herod stones are unique in that they have a marginal dressing, meaning that each had a frame or margin chiseled round its edge. In a Herod or Hadrian built wall, we would see stones that have matching equal margins, which the southeast corner does not have. This wall is made up of recycled Herod or Hadrian stones taken from somewhere else and used to build this wall. Some of the stones even have mason marks on them. The masons cut and marked the stones at the quarry so that the builders could place them properly to create a specified building, much like a prefab house of today. This section of the east wall was not built by Hadrian builders. And of course the southeast corner of Solomon's Stables didn't exist when Nehemiah was rebuilding the city wall. At that time, one would have been able to see the east wall of Triple Gate, Solomon's porch, the very edge of a steep hill. Also, a bridge crossing the Kidron Valley, the bridge of the Red Heifer, would have started at Solomon's porch, or portico, which contained the east gate, and continued across to the Mount of Olives. This section of the east wall was most likely built by the Roman Emperor Hadrian around 130 to 135 AD. He needed a large flat mount to build the Temple of Jupiter complex on. Here is an example of the Temple of Jupiter complex in Lebanon, just to get an idea of its size and shape. To accommodate such a huge temple, similar to this one, Hadrian's builders would have needed to build up and increase the size of the mount at the southeast end. If my theory is correct, then the best way to do this would be to build his south wall on the pre-existing platform at the top of the huge steps of the Ophel. A partial wall, or what was left of it, would have already existed, and he need only make it a much higher wall. The partial wall would have once been the inner wall surrounding Herod's temple and priest court. Emperor Hadrian would need only to build up and extend that wall to the triple gate building, Solomon's portico, and then create a new southeast corner, seen here as Solomon's stables. As you can see in this photo, if he tried to take his rectangle enclosure any further to the south, he would have to build very deeply into the Kidron Valley for his new southeast corner. To rebuild the outer wall of the former Temple of the Jews, seen in the white writing on the photo, would not work for that reason. This would mean that the Romans were responsible for the size and shape of the mount we see today. Of course, the temple house was completely destroyed in 70 AD, long before the ground level of the Temple Mount was raised to this new level. A lower wall, believed to have been built possibly by Herod's grandson, extended all the way from Triple Gate down to where the southeast corner is now. The Red Heifer Bridge would have gone in between that wall and the Hasmonean wall, the straight joint, to build up the southeast corner. To accommodate the Temple of Jupiter complex would require tearing down that bridge. Hadrian had to remove that part of the bridge from the straight joint upward to the portico of Solomon, and then build the terraced vaults. It would require building a gate into this wall, which could then be reconnected with the bridge outside of the wall. The arch and walled-up arched openings can still be seen in the wall today near the straight joint. This bridge traversed the Kidron Valley, and from there one could look back and straight through the east gate to the Holy of Holies. Jewish people of the time desired to be entombed directly across from the east gate. In a direct line from this arch are the tombs of what people call the tomb of Zechariah. This tomb was actually built in the 1st century for the high priest. It would have been below the bridge. The Jewish cemetery continues outward from there. I thought that finding the water channels ending with a pool right next to the temple was probably the final thing to confirm this southern location for me. But to my delight, there was even more surprises to come. When Herod the Great came into power over the Jews, he desired to build a new temple. The porch of Herod's temple would be 100 cubits wide, much wider than the old temple. This required some adjustments to be made in the width of the original platform created by Solomon. It must also be widened. The platform included the temple courts, women's court, and the portico on the east called Solomon's porch. This platform was called the way or street leading to the Holy of Holies. There was a hell or kell a walkway on the south and north side of the old temple platform. In the Mishnah it says that Herod set the foundation stone for the new temple a little more to the north and a little more to the west of the original temple. In doing this, he actually caused the northern section of the temple compound to become smaller. The Mishnah says that the southern section of the temple compound had the most open space, then the women's court, followed by the northern section, which had the least amount of open space. The only way for the northern section to be made smaller is if the inner platform was increased in width towards the north by Herod, and a new kell built on the north side. If my location for the temple is correct, then there should be evidence in the ruins on Warren's map to confirm it. Warren shows the northeast corner of the Triple Gate Halls, which would have been the northeast corner of the old platform. I marked out the size of Solomon's platform in red dashed lines. This would have been the original platform built by Solomon. On this platform, he built his porch on the east. He had claimed the land as far as it could go, and could go no further, because of the valleys on the east and west. Notice that the western hall ends with what looks like a nipple. When I laid my diagram over the top of the map, I could see that the nipple fit perfectly into the opening in Herod's northern inner gate. His gate goes beyond the red dashed line of Solomon's platform. To me, this shows that even though the double halls were made after 70 AD, there was still enough of the old ruins of Herod's gate left to indicate an opening that could be dug through. However, Solomon's gates would have been smaller and closer together, along with the 10-cubit wide kell beyond his north inner gate. In this map we can see that Solomon's inner gates and the north and south kell were within the parameters of the old platform. Herod's temple was to be built more to the north, causing the platform and north inner gate to also be rebuilt more to the north. As you can see, Herod's north inner gate was extended beyond Solomon's platform. Plus there must be a kell, a walkway, on the north side of the platform, extending the width of the platform, what appears to be about 20 cubits at a regular Hebrew cubit. Notice that this decreases the northern section of the compound, making it the smallest of the outer courts. Remember that Herod the Great built the temple and upper courts and gates, but the walls of his extended compound were added later by his grandson and great-grandson, and were not totally completed till around 566 AD. This would mean that the old walls of Solomon's temple remained standing for the protection of the new temple. So when it is said that the northern section was decreased in size by Herod, they were speaking about the compound within Solomon's old walls, not Herod's extended compound. Can I also show this through the ruins? I think so. Notice the eastern passage of double halls. The one that extends further north ends as if going through a gate opening and then circles out. So where was the gate that they dug through? It would have been the ruins of Solomon's old north gate. But this gets even more interesting for me. It reveals how Herod handled the problem of the temple being built more to the north than the old one was, and yet leaving the east gate of Solomon remaining in the same place. How then could one see through the east gate and also through the inner gate and into the temple itself? the angle would be wrong. Easily remedied. Just make the inner gate a double gate with a double wide opening, which Herod did. In this diagram, you can see by the red dashed line that Solomon's gate now sits directly across from the southern half of the double gate. With the double wide opening in this gate, one would still be able to see into the temple and view the curtain of the Holy of Holies with no problem. Now let's look at the Ophel excavations beyond the south wall. The Ophel mound excavations began in 1968, soon after Israel got control of Jerusalem. At that time, these ruins lay beneath tons of earth, as we can see by this photo taken in 1923. A later side view of the same area reveals the ruins that were completely below ground. The wall cutting through these ruins, cutting the Ophel mound in half, is the Muslim city wall, built in the 15th century. It meets up with the building erected by the Crusaders in the 12th century. The Crusaders' building was built on the huge steps that led up to Doublegate. These steps reveal a lot about the Ophel mound. They were originally cut into bedrock, which protruded out of the earth. This is evidence of a gigantic rock mounding out of the ground at the top of this hill. I believe this rock to be the base of the threshing floor that King David bought and built his altar to God. Josephus tells us that Fort Antonia was built on the highest hill, which overlooked the temple, and the temple overlooked the city. If Fort Antonia was built on the highest hill and overlooked the temple, then the temple was on a lower hill, or mound, on the same eastern ridge of Jerusalem. The lower mound is called the Ophel, and the temple was built upon the Ophel. So let's begin this part of the study with the Ophel steps. The Ophel steps were 215 feet wide, paved with smoothly trimmed stones, and its foundation steps are cut into the bedrock. There appears to be 14 deep steps and 16 shallow steps. The shallow steps are for stepping up to the next level. The large steps are where one would stop and pray before ascending to the next step. And it's the same as it was for the steps in the women's court that lead up to the eastern inner gate. At the top of the steps would then have been a terrace called the Kell, a 15-foot wide walkway which was bounded by the walls of the inner court. According to Josephus, there were 14 steps leading up to the Kell or terrace. The Crusaders' building hides most of Doublegate and a large part of the western half of the steps and the Kell. I found even more proof in the ruins that the southern half of Solomon's temple complex and Herod's extended courts lay beyond the south wall. Herod's wall foundations would most likely be thicker than Solomon's older wall. The thinner wall ends and the thicker begins at the same place where Hadrian's extended walls would have begun. There is no way to know which earthquake in Israel's history caused the twisted mess in the midst of the Ophel Hill ruins, but it seems as though it happened sometime before the Muslims built their new city wall through the center of the ruins. In the picture, I rotated the collapsed area and put things back together a little to get an idea of how it would have looked pre-earthquake. This allowed me to further identify the position of Herod's southern gate. which would have been 600 feet directly across from his northern gate. Once the ruins are adjusted like this, then room for the gate can be seen. The city wall was built right through the center of it all. As near as I can tell, a wall on the other side of the city wall is the other half of the southern gate. Now let's look at the southwest corner of the Temple Mount. Across from the southwest corner of the Temple Mount is another corner to its south. It too was built with Hadrian stones with the trademark drafted margins. In between the two walls is what I believe to be the entrance to a lower gate, street level. Steps were uncovered leading upward between the two walls. I believe at one time these steps led up to a gate. South of this second wall, the western half of the Ophel is located. Excavations revealed important data on the history of the early Islamic Jerusalem. 4 edifices, about 90 by 90 meters each, were unearthed and dated to the Umayyad period, 7th and 8th century CE. These buildings are probably part of the official facility erected by the Caliph al-Walid, and shedding new light on the status of Jerusalem during the Islamic period. This, of course, stopped the western half of the Ophel from being excavated down to the level of that on the eastern side. This whole area is now called the Ophel Archaeological Garden. This is a photo of the western section of the Ophel as it looks today. All work has stopped and any ruins from earlier time will remain hidden. In 1838, an American historian, Edward Robertson, discovered some stones projecting from the western wall, now called Robertson's Arch. Excavations below this arch revealed a second temple street, of which the bridge of this arch crossed over. This bridge served as an entrance into Herod's extended courts to the west, giving easier access to the temple to those living on the west hill. The Wailing Wall on the western wall is located on the northwest section of Herod's extended temple complex. My location for the temple is the only one that shows the Wailing Wall as an actual wall of Herod's 600 by 600 foot temple. To summarize, let's look at 8 important points concerning the location of the temple. Dome of the Rock Theory. Point 1. The early explorers found no water channels going uphill to the Dome of the Rock area. The aqueduct entered the Temple Mount and angled southward, indicating a lower placement for the temple. In the southern mount location, Robertson theory, the aqueduct flows south towards the temple. The water system brought the living water to cleanse the priest court. A pool is located under the temple court for the filling of the brazen laver each morning. Dome of the Rock Theory. Point 2. With this theory, the temple once stood on the highest hill, the Dome of the Rock platform. However, Josephus wrote that Fort Antonia was on the highest hill, not the temple. Southern Mount location. In this theory, Fort Antonia was on the highest hill, Dome of the Rock platform, as described by Josephus. Dome of the Rock Theory. Point 3. The early maps showed the moat described by Josephus as being between the highest hill and Bethesda Hill. However, with the dome theory, the ruins of the moat are not acknowledged. With the southern mount location, the moat is shown to be between Fort Antonia and Bethesda Hill, just as described by Josephus. Dome of the Rock Theory. Point 4. The east gate is toward the extreme north end of Nehemiah wall. Solomon entered the east gate from his palace, which was located on Ophel Hill. There was no way to enter the gate at the north end from the Ophel. Southern mount location. The east gate is located within Triple Gate, Solomon's portico, and was in the center of the east wall. It was located just above Solomon's palace on the Ophel Hill, and was the king's entrance to the temple compound. Dome of the Rock Theory. Point 5. This theory claims the east gate did not enter directly into the women's court, but is approximately 240 feet to the north of the women's court. In the southern location, the east gate entered directly into the women's court, as it should be. Dome of the Rock Theory. Point 6. In this theory, Herod built the passageways from Double Gate, and yet the courses of stone show these passageways to have been built after the destruction of Herod's temple in 70 AD. Southern mount location. In this theory, Double Gate was built after 70 AD and was an attempt to rebuild Herod's inner north and south gates and the Israeli court between the two. Dome of the Rock Theory. Point 7. In this theory, all of the Temple Mount was Herod's temple compound. The mount is around 1,000 by 1,550 feet, almost double the size of Herod's temple. Herod extended the temple area, but it remained a square, not a rectangle. Southern mount location shows the temple compound as being 1 furlong by 1 furlong, 600 by 600 feet, as recorded by Josephus, and this is confirmed by the ruins under the mount and also excavations on Ophel Hill. Dome of the Rock Theory. Point 8. In this theory, Fort Antonia incorporated land on Bethesda Hill and was only a small rectangular area. But according to Josephus, Fort Antonia was also 1 furlong square. Southern mount location. Fort Antonia and its compound is shown to be 600 by 600 feet. The compound of Fort Antonio and the temple compound together were 2 furlongs in length and 1 furlong in width, 1,200 by 600 feet. I hope you enjoyed this study on the Temple Mount location. For more detailed information, it can be found at my website at templemountlocation.com. Thank you.